One of the most enduring features of American political culture is a deeply rooted inclination toward limiting government power. Unlike political traditions that view the state as a primary source of order, moral guidance, or collective purpose, American political culture has long treated government as a necessary but potentially dangerous instrument. Authority is tolerated, not trusted. Power is granted conditionally and monitored closely. This cultural posture toward government is not accidental. It reflects historical experience, revolutionary ideology, and patterns of political development that continue to shape American policy debates and institutional design. Cultural inclination toward limiting government power. In American political culture, government is often viewed less as a partner in collective problem solving and more as a potential threat to individual liberty. This does not imply hostility to all government action, but it does create a strong presumption against concentrated or unchecked authority. As a result, political legitimacy in the United States is frequently defined negatively. Government is considered legitimate not because of what it accomplishes, but because of what it refrains from doing. Citizens are more likely to ask whether government has overstepped its bounds than whether it has fulfilled a positive moral mission. This orientation helps explain why American political discourse often frames policy questions in terms of limits, constraints, and safeguards rather than collective goals. Historical roots, colonial experience. The American distrust of authority has deep roots in the colonial experience. British colonial governance was frequently perceived as distant, unresponsive, and arbitrary. Decisions affecting colonial life were often made by officials who neither lived among the colonists nor shared their interests. Colonial resistance to imperial authority fostered the belief that power exercised from afar is inherently suspect and prone to abuse. This experience reinforced the idea that liberty is best preserved when political authority is local, constrained, and accountable. Revolutionary ideology. Revolutionary ideology transformed colonial grievances into a broader political philosophy. The American Revolution was not merely a struggle for independence, but a rejection of the idea that authority should be accepted by default. Revolutionary thinkers argued that power must be justified continuously and that unchecked authority inevitably leads to tyranny. This outlook is captured in the political thought of figures such as Thomas Jefferson, who famously emphasized vigilance against governmental overreach and insisted that liberty depends on constant resistance to the accumulation of power. The revolution thus embedded suspicion of authority into the national identity, framing limited government as a moral necessity rather than a technical preference. Ongoing skepticism toward governmental authority. This skepticism did not disappear with independence. Instead, it became institutionalized and culturalized. Americans have historically been wary not only of monarchs, but of legislatures, executives, courts, bureaucracies, and standing armies. Even democratic authority is treated cautiously. Elections legitimize leaders, but they do not erase concerns about abuse of power. As a result, Americans often support mechanisms that slow decision-making, fragment authority, and make coordinated action difficult. This skepticism also explains why public trust in government has tended to be fragile, fluctuating with perceptions of overreach, corruption, or inefficiency. Influence on policy debates. Distrust of authority exerts a powerful influence on policy debates across the political spectrum. Proposals for expanded government action, whether in economic regulation, social welfare, public health, or national security, are often evaluated through the lens of potential abuse rather than intended benefit. Opponents of government intervention frequently argue not that problems do not exist, but that granting power to address them creates risks greater than the problems themselves. Even supporters of government action often feel compelled to justify proposals in terms of safeguards, sunset provisions, and limits. This cultural orientation helps explain why American policy debates are often framed as disputes over government legitimacy rather than policy effectiveness alone. Influence on institutional design. The distrust of authority embedded in American political culture is reflected directly in the design of political institutions. The constitutional system deliberately disperses power through separation of powers, checks and balances, federalism, bicameralism. These arrangements are not simply technical solutions, they are cultural expressions of a belief that power must restrain power. Inefficiency, delay, and conflict are accepted as the price of preventing domination. Rather than trusting any single institution to govern wisely, the system assumes that ambition, self-interest, and error are permanent features of political life. Concluding perspective. Limited government and distrust of authority are not peripheral features of American political culture. They are central organizing principles. Rooted in colonial experience and revolutionary ideology, they continue to shape how Americans evaluate leaders, policies, and institutions. This cultural orientation does not eliminate government action, but it profoundly shapes its form. Authority must be justified, constrained, and constantly scrutinized. In this sense, American political culture treats liberty not as a gift from government, but as something that must be protected from it.